Let's look at some highlights from the show. The first place I want to stop is a wall that hosts two artists, both of whom are from Texas, both of whom are thinking about the borderland. We'll look at Annalise Gratovich's work, Borderland, first. The central figures in this work are a mother and child surrounded by the spiky protective leaves of yucca and cactus. These plants appear in the artist's work as symbols of endurance, resilience, and protection, and most importantly, are symbolic of the artist's homeland, Texas. The print is critical of the border wall between Mexico and the US, something that many Texans feel is a humanitarian, cultural, and ecological disaster. Despite the protective boundaries of the cactus, the bodies of the mother and child are marked by two types of fences, a chain link fence for the child and a wooden slatted fence for the mother. And the distinction in fencing here may allude to the current presidential administration's family separation policy at the border, which the artist describes as a humanitarian crisis. Proceeds from this edition support Texas Civil Rights Project as it works to reunite separated families and demands that everyone involved in the crisis is treated with the dignity and humanity they deserve. And thus far, the artist has raised over $2,000 to date for this project. In dialogue with this work, elsewhere on the wall is a print called Non-Native Branches by Camila Linaweaver. This artist was born in Santiago, Chile, and raised in the US, and is an experimental printmaker who explores landscape as metaphor, crafting narratives of immigrant displacement, loss, and alienation. She's based in Houston. And what I love about this work is that it doesn't portray the border from any particular side. It's kind of a neutral perspective with this raking diagonal composition that explores on one side a sort of fibrous, dry ground, very texturally rich, and on the other side, distinct signs of life that appear sparse and fragile. Highlight number 2. I want to take a look at Terry Schupbach-Gordon's piece, Lifted into Light number 3. This is a smallish work, and it's really worth a close look because there's a lot of interesting detail. It's a woodcut collage, letterpress, and linen thread. Schupbach-Gordon is a printmaker, puppeteer, a book artist, and a disability advocate. And I should add a former Minneapolis resident who now lives in North Carolina, and is a founder of Catbird Press, which publishes artist books. In this piece, we see a man's body surrounded in a field of torn, multicolored fragments, all of a sort of similarly faded color palette, some of which appear to contain logs of data, measurements, others that reveal the word infirm, stated in all capital letters. So what we can gather from this work is that infirmity or sickness seems to be part of the field that surrounds this figure. And I just want to read the entire artist statement that was sent along with this piece. My effort to live gracefully within a body increasingly defined by disability requires that I redefine traditional notions of beauty, strength, independence, and fragility. Disability impacts all aspects of my life. It is part of my identity, and as such is the lens through which I see the world. I create works that are intentionally beautiful and affirmative in their meaning. My work tries to directly reframe the language around disability and to address not the physicality that we do not have or have lost, but rather to speak about what we know and how we know it. The work is cut, pieced, reassembled, and sewn together much as my own life is. It is my attempt to reimagine fragility and re-embrace a kind of strength that includes that fragility. Highlight number 3. William Evertson's Windy Day in Hong Kong references the umbrella movement, which grew out of the pro-democracy sit-in protests that occupied city streets in Hong Kong in 2014. Led by students, Protests challenged proposed reforms to Hong Kong's election system that would reduce electoral transparency. The umbrella became a tool of civil disobedience, protecting protesters' bodies against pepper spray used by Hong Kong police during the 79-day occupation, and protecting their identities against widespread surveillance. The umbrella has been labeled by the Hong Kong police as a weapon and remains a symbol of resistance. It's been used currently in protests against new extradition laws that threaten Hong Kong's civil liberties. And here, what we see is a fog of tear gas that merges a foreground and an unknown background. And this fog, or this cloud, is both a symbol of escalated violence between police and the mask-wearing activists, and a cloak of invisibility that prevents us from witnessing the entirety of the scene. There's a striking parallel on view in this show elsewhere, which speaks to US histories of state violence in protests against racism and police brutality, which is on view across the room in Joss Sancez's print, Selma 1965, Portland 2020. Highlight number 4. Tanekeya Word. We were there, we are here, we are in the future. Tanekeya Word is represented by 2 works in this exhibition, but for now I'll focus on this powerful image. We were there, we are here, we are in the future. Based in Milwaukee and hailing from Mississippi, Word is a scholar and an artist whose work is deeply committed to investigating what she describes as, quote, Black women's geographies, their spatialities, real, imagined, and lived practices. Here, she presents a Black woman's silhouette on a bright yellow ground. The woman's hair wrap and dress are covered with names of her foremothers. Reminds me in a lot of ways of a really famous poster by Black Power activist and artist Wadsworth Jarrell, made in 1967 of Angela Davis, itself a vibrantly colored portrait comprised of letters and slogans related to the movement that Davis helped advance. The quote at the bottom of Word's print reads, Black women fighting for equity in the US since our foremothers' wombs. Both a testament to Black women's fight to exist and their labors, often unrecognized, to ensure the rights of their daughters and granddaughters. The artist cites as a model the work and life of Emma Amos, who once stated that, quote, for me, a Black woman artist, to walk into the studio is a political act.